A man in his late 20s was not doing very well in the success department. He had tried moving on to become a plastic surgeon, but found himself dropping out of class after some legal trouble. When his parents decided to cut him off financially, he decided to make their last Thanksgiving on Earth a living hell. This is the story of a seemingly happy family and their final Thanksgiving dinner together. Think of it as a cautionary tale, a story that shows that you never really know what someone is planning and hiding behind a happy attitude. The father of the family was named Joel Michael Guy Sr., and he was 61 years old at the time of this story. Originally from Surgeonsville, Tennessee, he was working as a pipeline engineering designer, doing very well for himself. The mother in the family was named Lisa Guy, 55 at the time of this story. She worked as a human resources accounts payable administrator. The two had been married for 31 years ever since Joel's previous marriage ended, with those around them saying that they were perfect for each other. Joel had 3 daughters from a previous relationship: Michelle, Candace, and Angela. The 3 of them had even started having kids of their own. Together, Joel and Lisa had 1 son together in 1988, Joel Guy Jr. They basically enjoyed anything that meant that the whole family could be together, whether that was being out in nature or especially being out on the water. They were crazy about their kids and their grandkids, but they were getting up in years and decided that it was about time to retire and live the easy life. They were hoping to move into a new home in Hawkins County and live out the rest of their days in peace. Joel Jr. graduated from Hahnville High School before moving on to attend and graduate from the Louisiana School for Math, Science, and Arts in 2006. He then went on to Louisiana State University, living in Baton Rouge and training to become a plastic surgeon, before withdrawing from all of his classes and dropping out. However, he had never worked and was supported entirely by his family. In fact, Lisa's paycheck from her job went entirely towards supporting him, with her having very little money, if any, left over for herself. Lisa really doted on Joel Jr., giving him basically anything he wanted and calling him very often while he lived on his own. While Joel Jr. was somewhat social in his childhood, by college he really only had one friend, his roommate Michael McCracken. Even then, he mostly stayed in his room and didn't communicate with anyone. Virtually everyone described Joel Jr. as a distant outsider. Aside from with his own family, he never bothered to even try to communicate with anyone else. Even when it came to his own family, he wasn't even a part of their group chat. His half-sisters have said that he didn't even know their kids' names. Things weren't a whole lot better with his roommate/best friend, being that he would usually go up to 5 days without even speaking to him. As Joel Jr.'s life continued to go nowhere and his parents wanted more and more to retire, they decided that it was time to cut him off and force him into independence, especially if he wasn't going to continue his schooling anymore. It had been an ongoing family discussion for quite some time, and it seemed that now would be as good of a time as any to finally put it into place. They decided that they would tell Joel Jr. in person, which would likely be the next big time that anyone got together as a family, Thanksgiving of 2016. Joel Sr. and Lisa had sold their Knoxville home, planning to move out to Joel Sr.'s hometown of Surgeonsville after the move-out was finished. On November 24th, the whole family would attend their last get-together at this home, preparing to have one last dinner there before all of the furniture was gone. That Thanksgiving, Joel Jr. was acting pretty differently than usual. Michelle, walking out to her car to get something, noticed something strange in Joel's vehicle: 2 large blue plastic containers in the seats. But back inside, his sisters noted that he seemed noticeably more happy and active than ever before, socializing and even offering to play with his nieces and nephews. He took them to show them his old room and his old toys. Given that everything was going so well, the family debated on waiting to tell Joel Jr. that he would be cut off on Christmas instead. After Thanksgiving, the whole family went home, except for Joel Jr., who said that he wanted to stay and enjoy his time with the family for a bit longer. At the time, nobody had any reason to believe that his intentions were anything but pure. Joel Jr. had been writing in a notebook behind the scenes, breaking down a list of his parents' different assets. In it, he wrote, "Assets. Her assets. Her life insurance. $500,000. Possibly more. With him missing/dead, I get the whole thing. All of her other assets are joint. Go to him if missing. Unknown if he is dead. His assets, including all joint property if missing. When he gets all joint property, he also gets joint debt. Knoxville house. Homeowner's insurance possibly but probably. Worthless after fire, owe $100,000. Surgeonsville house. Appraised at $400,000 plus. Her car, his SUV, not paid for. His boat, his old truck, paid for. His 401k, $80,000. He could possibly have savings and or investment accounts. Joel had figured that, if his father was to be gone, his mother's $500,000 life insurance policy would all go to him, given that his sisters were only her older stepchildren. Upon this realization, he started to research how to facilitate this into happening himself. Researching different murders, he started to compile a list on how to commit what he felt would be the perfect crime. On one page, he wrote, "Ultraviolet light shows fingerprints. Check mail before leaving. To get rid of blood, use peroxide and bleach." On another page, he wrote down the basic components of the human body, brainstorming how he might get rid of them completely. Destruction of bodies, 20% fat, 20% protein, 55% water, 5% other compounds. But really it was on the next few pages that he would truly get into a more concrete plan. He began to brainstorm exactly how he would go through with the whole thing, writing a step-by-step guide for himself so that he wouldn't forget. This is where his intentions were made abundantly clear. One page included what would become a simple outline of what he intended to do and the supplies he would need to collect beforehand. Get killing knives, quiet, multiple. Get carving knives to make small pieces. Get sledgehammer, crush bones. Bring blender and food grinder, grind meat. Get bleach, denature proteins. Get plastic bin for denaturation process. Does not matter where they're killed. Just get rid of bloody spots to prevent evidence of time of death. Not the mattress or couches. Get rid of bodies inside house. There and my DNA already there. Open up doggy door to provide entryway. He needs to be blamed, not intruder. Flush chunks down toilet, not garbage disposal. Get plastic sheeting for disposal process. Get hollow point bullets just in case we'll be seen buying bullets. Just use computer room gun. Check to make sure there are bullets, last resort. He's not alive to claim her half of the insurance money. All mine, $500,000. Flood the house, cover up forensic evidence. Turn up the heater as high as it goes, speeds decomposition. Bleach reacts with luminol just like blood. Douse area with bleach. Big sprayer, lie, trash compactor. Body gives times of death, alibi. Don't have to get rid of body if there is no forensic evidence on the body. His fingerprints and DNA. The next page, though, would contain his actual plan. Here he debated on what to do, crossing out certain parts of his plan and rewriting them upon changing his mind. It's here that he really brainstormed the exact steps he would take to get his parents out of the way. First off, he planned to distract his father so that he could sneak up on him and stab him from behind. He wrote, "Minimize things I touch throughout visit. Wear gloves and socks to prevent fingerprints and footprints. Drop something down the garbage disposal to break it. Get him on the ground fixing it, kill him with a knife. Clean up mess from him before she gets home." After his father was gone, he would move on to the next step. He planned on framing the scene as if his father had killed his mother. At first, he even planned on making it look as if his father killed their dog as well. Either feeling guilty about killing a dog or realizing that it wouldn't make sense for his father to do, he changed this part of the plan, crossing out the parts about killing their dog. He wrote, "Kill her with a knife. Kill the dog." And then he crossed that out and wrote, "Take the dog with you. Place her in the shower with dog." Then crossed out the part about the dog. "Turn on the hot water and point it at her to get rid of forensics. Remove her clothes and take them with me for disposal. Place him into plastic bin and use it to get him into upstairs bathroom. Cut off his arm and plant his flesh under her fingernails. Place her hand with his DNA so that his DNA is not washed away by the shower." After making it look as if his father had killed his mother in some sort of struggle and run away with the dog, he would then get to work on completely destroying his father's body to keep up the ruse, writing, "Use sodium hydroxide to destroy his soft tissue and soften bones for transport. Baste once every hour to accelerate. Flush sodium hydroxide down the toilet. Wash out bin with handheld shower head and then direct handheld into toilet to wash everything out of the pipes and then into the public waterway. Douse killing rooms, kitchen, with bleach. Place hair curler on flammable paper and flammable containers of gasoline in 4 locations. His killing room, her killing room, his bathroom, her bathroom. Wipe down areas near killing rooms and bathrooms. Turn heaters up to 90 degrees to melt fingerprints and dry everything." And then, lastly, he would need to come up with some sort of alibi before he got rid of all of the evidence. He wrote, Set her phone to send me a text message on Sunday to prove that I was in BR and she was alive. Leave through front door and wipe down doorknobs. Timers for flammable set for Friday at 10 a.m. Sunlight masks fire but not smoke. Overnight work so they can't report it. This was an idea that Joel Jr. had been cooking up for a while now. He was seen at several different stores buying all sorts of equipment over the past weeks leading up to this. On November 7th, he was seen purchasing several different items from an Ace Hardware store in Napoleonville, like muriatic acid and hydrogen peroxide. He was later spotted at Home Depot, caught on security camera footage buying some spray bleach, extension cords, and a timer. Then, on November 19th, he was seen buying a knife at Academy Sports. Finally, he was seen buying a few large blue bins at a Walmart in Knoxville. All in all, Joel Jr. really had done his research. He really felt that he was doing everything right by buying his material at different stores, setting up an alibi, and coming up with a plan to frame his father. He didn't take into account that real life is nothing like TV, though, and nothing would be so simple. On November 26th, Joel Jr. was still staying with his parents after his sisters and the rest of the family had left. He waited for a chance for his mom to go out and leave him alone with his dad. He would come to get that opportunity at around noon that day when Lisa went to a local Walmart to buy some groceries. Now, Joel Jr. was left alone with his father. His plan was already going to deviate from his notes. For one reason or another, he gave up on his plan of breaking the garbage disposal and sneaking up on his father that way. Instead, he pulled out a knife and chose to attack him in the workout room on the second floor of the house. It seems that he didn't sneak up on his father too well as a struggle took place. After flipping over the Bowflex machine, tearing the blinds off the windows, and getting blood all over the walls, Joel succeeded in killing his unarmed father. Joel Sr. would end up with 42 different injuries from the knife, with 12 of them being so intense that they carved lines into his ribs, completely severing some of them. With the damage to his lungs, liver, and kidneys, he had no chance of survival. One stab to his shoulder was so violent that a piece of the knife even broke off and remained inside his muscle tissue. Joel Jr. then got to work on his father's body. Seemingly in line with his plan to save a portion of his father's arms to frame his mother, he removed his hands at the wrist and his arms at the shoulders. He then removed the legs from the hip and one of his feet from his ankle. He cut off his clothes and left them in a pile in the workout room. Ready to proceed with his plan, Joel Jr. now had nothing to do but wait for his mother to come home. She did just that, entering through the front door after the previous attack. She placed the groceries on the floor near the door and began to walk up the stairs. There, Joel Jr. ambushed her, attacking her much in the way that he attacked his father. Much like Joel Sr., she was alive just long enough to be well aware that her son was killing her as she tried and failed to fight for her life. Lisa was stabbed 31 times in total. This time, 21 of the wounds were severe, with 9 of her ribs being completely severed. While Joel Jr. had originally planned on leaving his mom's body behind, only storing his father's to make it look like he had fled, he once more deviated from that plan. He cut off his mom's clothing, removed her legs just below the knees, and removed her arms at the shoulders. He used some sort of blunt tool to completely remove her head at the neck level. Joel Jr. took all of the pieces of his parents and began to place them into large blue containers. Here he covered them with various chemicals and left them to dissolve. For some reason, his mother's head was an exception. He took it and placed it in a pot to boil on the stove, leaving the stove burning from there on out. He left his father's hands on the floor in the workout room. Not knowing what to do with the dog, he simply locked him inside of a room upstairs. The fight with his father is likely what led to Joel Jr. changing his plan so much. During the battle, he suffered several cuts to his hands from his own knife, including a very deep laceration on his left thumb. He went into the guest bathroom upstairs and attempted to patch himself up with medical tape. Without much use of his hands, he decided that he would leave the scene as it was for now. He went to Walmart at 3:30 p.m. to buy some first aid supplies for his hands, including bandages and ointment. He also brought some more alcohol and hydrogen peroxide. The next day, Joel Jr. decided to leave town entirely without putting much more work into the crime scene. He tried to clean up a bit, but it's likely that the injuries to his hands were preventing him from putting in much elbow grease now that all the adrenaline had worn off. He left the dog locked up upstairs and left his parents' bodies, at least good portions of them, in the plastic tubs to deteriorate. He then placed a few space heaters down and turned up the central heating on the house before leaving. He drove back to Baton Rouge and went straight to a student clinic to have the wounds on his hands treated. When Lisa didn't show up for work and wasn't answering her phone, her boss, Jennifer Whitehead, knew something must be wrong. For one, she never missed work and she also never made herself hard to contact. This was a first. So she called 911 and asked them to perform a welfare check on the couple. Soon after, a few deputies went down to the home on Goldview Lane. They noticed that the property was being sold, with a for sale sign being out in the front yard. However, a real estate lock hadn't been put in just yet. Instead, the back door lock had been placed onto the front door. Through gaps in the curtains, they could see that all the groceries were on the floor by the door, perishable items that definitely wouldn't have been left out. When they moved to the back of the house, they could tell from the hole where the lock used to be on the back door that there was an intense heat coming from the home, along with a putrid smell. The police continued to knock on the front door, but there was no response. They called another detective as they tried to look through the windows and doors. They could hear a dog barking somewhere inside, and the windows felt hot to the touch. Eventually, an officer found a garage door opener in one of the cars that had been left unlocked. With that, they went inside. They called for anyone who may be inside, but continued to receive no response. They gave the inside door one more shout before heading in. They wandered around the living room, finding the place eerily quiet besides the distant howl of a dog. They began to cough as the smell of chemicals and death overwhelmed them, with some of the officers even starting to feel lightheaded and woozy. As they looked up the stairs, they could see blood droplets on the walls and carpeting, increasing in volume each step. Then they walked up the stairs. Clearing each room, the officers began to see more blood on the walls and on the floors. One officer noticed what appeared to be some body parts on the floor at the end of the hallway. With that, the tone changed drastically very quickly. Now the welfare of the homeowner was no question. They began to speed up their search. One officer quietly began to mutter, "Hold up, oh my god," as the smell got more intense. In the exercise room upstairs, they found much more blood, with the other officers noting the previously mentioned body parts. These turned out to be a pair of hands on the floor. It was then that they had to back out. They were left with no choice but to call the forensics team before continuing. The forensics team came inside to see the chemicals spread out across the kitchen floor and tools on the table, for example a hammer. On the stovetop was a pot with something boiling inside as the stovetop was still on. Moving on, they saw a dining room with 2 guns on the table. On the wall was the thermostat, set to a high 90 degrees. They made their way up the stairs just as the previous officers had. More chemicals and blood were seen at the top of the stairs. In the bedroom, they found more tools, chemicals, and garbage bags. Going into the master bathroom, they found the room to be completely coated in plastic with more tools lying about. A garden hose had been attached to the shower head. Further in, there were 2 large blue plastic tubs. As they walked towards them, they noticed a knife in the sink. Moving forward, they looked into the tubs, seeing a dark liquid with pieces of human body floating inside. Another space heater was on the ground next to them. They then made their way into the exercise room. On the way was another bathroom, this one covered in even more blood with what appeared to be used medical tape in the shower. In the exercise room was a lot more blood, along with a flipped-over Bowflex machine and clear signs of a struggle. At the bottom of the machine, next to the treadmill, were the pair of hands. They came across a suitcase, one that it seems Joel Jr. had used to carry his murder tools. Inside the suitcase was the address for the Ace Hardware store that Joel had visited, along with a reminder to pick up some sewer line cleaner. Due to the sheer volume of biohazard material in the house, it took over 24 hours straight to process the crime scene. Eventually the dog, still alive, was removed from the home along with the bodies of Joel Sr. and Lisa. Finding Joel Jr.'s notebook, which also contained some of his old homework and therefore his name, there wasn't really much of a question as to who their prime suspect would be. The FBI, the Knox County Sheriff's Office, and the East Baton Rouge County Sheriff's Office all put Joel Jr. under surveillance for the time being. On November 29th, 3 days after the murder took place, they caught him leaving his apartment and getting into his car in the parking lot. It was here that they apprehended him. In his car, they found evidence that he was probably going back to continue the disposal, having an entire meat grinder in his trunk. Joel Jr. was thrown into the East Baton Rouge Parish Prison, accused of murdering both of his parents. As they booked him, they took pictures of him all over, including the injuries to his hands. Joel Jr., seemingly feeling it was all over, decided to call his roommate Michael from jail. He told Michael that he didn't have much of a chance to be happy anymore and that he should just consider him to be dead from here on out. He said that Michael would be the only aspect of his life that he would miss. He added then that his mom had paid his portion of the rent all the way out to August. Eventually, it came time for Joel Jr.'s first hearing in court ahead of his trial. The prosecutor, Leslie Nassio, stated that it was evident that the Guy family had gotten tired of paying their son's way. She added that it appeared that they had told him so at some point during the Thanksgiving trip after all. Joel Jr.'s defense team, including a public defender named Jonathan Harwell, didn't really have anything to save him. They didn't even deny anything that he had done. Instead, they said that the police had no right to search the home without Joel Jr.'s permission. The judge disagreed entirely, saying he did not reside and never had resided in these premises. His only connection to the property was a smattering, his word, of yearly visits. The judge said that, even if they could argue that he somehow had an expectation of privacy for his parents' house, they still had a probable cause to search the home given the circumstances anyway. Joel Jr.'s trial would proceed, set for September 28th, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of abuse of a corpse. Joel Jr. still pled not guilty, but also requested that he would be given the death penalty if he were convicted. Much like arguing that the police had no right to search the home, this also isn't how things work. Leslie Nacios and another prosecutor named Hector Sanchez said that it didn't matter what he wanted, they weren't going for the death penalty anyway. Instead, they were looking at life in prison with no possibility of parole for 51 years. Joel Jr. then conceded, accepting that he couldn't decide his own penalty. It wasn't clear why he went ahead and immediately requested the death penalty in the first place when he fully intended on continuing insisting that he was innocent. Many different people would come to take stand during the trial, including Joel Jr.'s sisters, who talked about his life as a loner, how he didn't even know their kids, and how different he was acting around Thanksgiving. Joel Jr.'s roommate Michael came to the stand as well, saying that he wasn't at all surprised that he had killed his parents, adding that he was fairly sure that he did do it. The court played the call that Joel Jr. made to Michael, in which he seemed fully convinced that he was screwed and didn't seem to have any hope that he could argue his innocence. His sister, though, said that he seemed outgoing and even happy before the murders, stating that was not a man about to commit a homicide. Leslie Nacios said that was very likely a part of his plan. She said, "Outgoing, friendly, and happy? I bet he was. He was getting ready to get what he wanted. He wanted to deflect attention from himself. If he acted angry, how would that look when their bodies turned up later?" Joel Jr. really wanted to keep the jurors from seeing a series of emails that he had exchanged with his father leading up to the murders. These emails showed that he had been in some sort of legal trouble at his university and his parents had taken out a whole mortgage just to pay for his mistakes. They also showed that, in the end, he never did get his degree, something he was pretty ashamed of. Joel Jr.'s defense presented no evidence at all on his behalf. Not only did Joel Jr. present no evidence or speak on the stand, he was even seen laughing before the various victim statements were read. Hector Sanchez told the jury, "They wanted to retire and deserve to retire. The motive is pretty apparent in this case. Money. $500,000 in life insurance proceeds. That's what this case is about." They insisted that there was no question at all that the murder was premeditated, with the notebook being a clear expression of Joel Jr.'s plans, and the security camera footage showing that he had been buying the tools and chemicals to use in the attack for weeks leading up to the crime. He ended by saying, "The proof has shown us that this began 19 days before these homicides took place. Joel Guy Jr. took care to plan these homicides. He had a plan to destroy evidence." He then showed the jury the main reason that he failed to complete his plans, the injuries to his hands. He presented the video of Joel Jr. buying the first aid at Walmart immediately after the killings. Joel Jr.'s defense tried to question the level of forensics performed on the scene, saying that more DNA testing should have been done. He also reiterated that Joel Jr.'s demeanor never implied that anything was wrong leading up to the crimes. Leslie told the court, "At one point, Joel Guy Sr. had his hands on a knife he knew his son was holding. Think about that. Lisa Guy saw this boy, her only child, you heard the testimony of how much she loved him, with a knife. He's used to having her pay for everything, and he wasn't about to let them cut him off. He would rather see them dead than let that happen." It wasn't long before the court was shown the full body cam recording of the whole grisly crime scene. The forensics team lead was able to state that they had found forensic evidence on what felt like every inch of the entire home. Needless to say, with the overwhelming volume of evidence and the complete lack of effort on the part of Joel Jr.'s team to prove that he wasn't guilty, the case was very open and shut. Joel Jr. was found guilty of his crimes, both murder and abuse of a corpse, and sentenced to serve out the rest of his life in prison. That wouldn't even be the end of the story, though, as Joel Jr. had no intention of going to jail that easily. In 2023, a couple of years after his sentencing, he and his public defender decided to try and overturn his sentence. They continued to argue that Joel Jr., who was visiting all the way from Baton Rouge, had technically been a part-time resident or an overnight guest. They said that this should have given him an expectation of privacy inside the home, meaning that the police never should have been able to enter and gather the evidence. They still did not argue that Joel Jr. hadn't committed the murders, though. The judges sided with the previous sentencing set in place, saying that Joel Jr. had failed in every way to show that he had some sort of long-term connection to his parents' home, a home that was already sold and they were planning to move out of anyway. He said that, while he may have indeed been invited as a guest, that particular relationship with his parents ended when he decided to kill them. The judges concluded by saying, even if the defendant had standing to challenge the search of the Golden View Lane residence, we agree with the state that the officer's entrance into the residence was supported by exigent circumstances. And with that, Joel Guy Jr.'s sentence was upheld, with that being the absolute only thing that his legal team had to get him out of this, or at least to get a retrial with much less evidence against him. They now have nothing further to use to argue his case. Joel Jr. is currently in prison at Northwest Correctional Complex in Temptonville, Tennessee, and he's very likely going to be there for the rest of his days. Once again, thank you for watching my video. If you found it interesting, please give it a like, it really helps me out in the algorithm, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Now I've opened up a merch store, there you can get yourself some cool Dire Trip t-shirts, or Dire Trip drip as they've been calling it. If you want, go ahead and follow me on social media, cause if anything were to ever happen to the channel, that would be the only way you'd ever really hear about it. I also really appreciate when people follow me on Patreon, there you can get videos early, ad-free, and uncensored. Channel memberships are up too, and you get most of the same benefits there as well. Once again, this has been your host Kyle, thank you, and good night.